Twelfth Night, whilst romantic in nature, is at its core a festive play. It revels in drunkenness, frivolity and mischief, often associated with the Twelfth Night holiday. It's this mischief that sets up the secondary plot of the play, surrounding the downfall of Malvolio. From reviews and writings of the play when it was first being performed, it was this subplot that seemed to capture the attention of the audience. So much so that the play was sometimes referred to as Malvolio, or the Play of Malvolio by Elizabethans. Malvolio plays the part of the stern antagonist for the merrymakers, and as we will find out, whilst Malvolio may have no use for festivity, festivity has considerable use for him. Every story needs a villain, someone for the audience to root against and for the characters to overcome, and Malvolio provides this obstacle in the main plot, but most of all in the subplot involving Maria, Fabian, Sir Toby Belch, and Sir Andrew Aguecheek. He is the stern steward, remaining removed from the festivities and challenging those who he sees as disruptive and irreverent. The reasoning behind why Shakespeare is particularly cruel towards Malvolio and his character is something debated, mainly about whether or not Malvolio's piety is an important factor in the ridicule. Malvolio is revealed to be quite a Puritan by the characters, which could suggest that Malvolio is merely a vessel for an anti-Puritan message. It wouldn't be a reach to assume that Shakespeare would have been against Puritanism as they were firmly against the theatre. His main vices are also hypocrisy and pride, which were common stereotypes associated with Puritans. Though interestingly, Maria addresses this.
The devil a Puritan that he is, or anything constantly, but a time pleaser. An affectioned ass that cons state without book and utters it by great swathes. The best persuaded of himself, so crammed as he thinks with excellencies, that it is his grounds of faith that all that look on him love him. And on that vice in him will my revenge find notable cause to work.
If you remove any mention of Puritanism from the play, nothing would change. Malvolio's character would still be a hypocritical sour grape, so it could be seen that Malvolio is being punished for his own characteristics, rather than simply being a representation and attack on Puritanism. Which brings us to the intentions of the mischief makers themselves, led by Maria.
Since the youth of the counts was today with my lady, she is much out of quiet. For Monsieur Malvolio, let me alone with him. If I do not gull him into a nay word and make him a common recreation, do not think I have wit enough to lie straight in my bed. I know I can do it.
Their motives are undoubtedly selfish, teasing Malvolio at not only his expense, but also that of Olivia, who is at the centre of the plan. After the plot, and before Malvolio falls for the trap, we see more about him and why he does indeed deserve some punishment. Under his self-righteousness and loyalty to Olivia, we see his more lecherous side.
Having been 3 months married to her, sitting in my state,
over a stone bow to hit him in the eye,
calling my officers about me in my branched velvet gown, having come from a daybed where I have left Olivia sleeping.
Fire and brimstone! Peace!
And then to have the humour of state, and after a demure travel of regard, telling them I know my place as I would they should do theirs, to ask for my kinsman, Toby.
Bolts and shackles! Peace! No! No!
When you bring up the subject of disguise in Twelfth Night, no doubt the first thing to come to mind would be Viola disguising herself as Cesario, and the hijinks that ensues when she and her twin brother get mistaken for one another. However, disguise is not necessarily a costume. Disguise, of course, is not merely a matter of costume and pose. It is also the corruption and twisting of words. which is a large theme throughout Twelfth Night, mainly through Feste's constant challenging of semantics.
Oh, troth, sir, I can yield you none without words, and words are grown so false I'm loath to prove reason with them.
This twisting of words is the crux of the deceit of this plot, by making Malvolio assume that Olivia is in love with him.
This is my lady's hand. These be her very C's, her U's, and her T's. And thus makes she her great P's. It is in contempt of question. Her hand.
Her C's, her U's, and her T's. Why that?
The wordplay would not have been lost on the audience. By Malvolio highlighting these letters, we see his true intentions and character, whilst also providing some bawdy humour. Malvolio abandons reason to come to his desired conclusion, much to the merriment of the onlookers, and so his lust lures Malvolio to act on the letter.
He will come to her in yellow stockings, and 'tis a colour she abhors. And cross-gartered, a fashion she detests, and he will smile upon her, which will now be so unsuitable to her disposition, being addicted to a melancholy as she is, that it cannot but turn him into a notable contempt.
We could take Maria at face value here, but Bernice Freeman offers some other explanations for Maria's choice in costuming. Firstly, yellow, especially in stockings, was the court fashion at the time. Secondly, yellow signified Malvolio's attempt to appear young. Thirdly, it was the symbol of jealousy. And fourthly, cross-gartering expressed Malvolio's Puritanism. All these reasons could play into Maria's choice of garment for Malvolio to impress Olivia, as she is, in a way, exposing Malvolio's true nature in his costume, removing the demure black for garish and symbolic yellow, therefore removing his disguise. Ultimately, though, it is Malvolio's language that decides his fate.
Heaven restore thee.
Remember who commended thy yellow stockings,
Thy yellow stockings.
and wished to see thee ever cross-gartered.
Cross-gartered.
I say, go to, thou art made, if thou desirest to be so.
Am I a maid?
Oh! Oh. If not, let me see thee a servant still.
Why, this is very midsummer madness.
The next part of the party's plan is where the plot takes a more serious turn, and even promotes pity. Malvolio is locked away in a dark room, removed from light, and desperately calls for help and protests that he is not mad. This change in power dynamic makes Toby, Maria, and Feste look more like bullies, their fun transformed into something more sinister. And this is all before Feste disguises himself as the priest Sir Topaz. Even though Malvolio cannot see Feste, he still chooses to wear a physical disguise, showing that this is more a performance for the audience than it is for the tortured Malvolio.
Well, I'll put it on. I'll put it on. And I will dissemble myself in it. And I would I were the first that ever dissembled in such a gown. I'm not tall enough to become the function well, nor lean enough to be thought a good student, but to be said an honest man and a good housekeeper goes as fairly as to say a careful man and a great scholar. The competitors.
This further develops the relationship between disguise and wordplay that we have seen throughout the play, as he tries to convince Malvolio that there is no darkness, only ignorance, fulfilling his own revenge on Malvolio.
Sayest thou that house is dark?
As hell, Sir Topaz!
Why, it hath be windows, transparent as barricadoes, and the clerestories toward the south-north are as lustrous as ebony, and yet complainest thou of obstruction.
I am not mad, Sir Topaz. I say to you, this house is dark.
Madman, thou errest. I say there is no darkness but ignorance, in which thou art more puzzled than the Egyptians in their fog.
And I say this house is as dark as ignorance, though ignorance were as dark as hell. And I say there was never man thus abused. I am no more mad than you are.
Here, Malvolio suffers a spiritual death. This marriage of eroticism and symbolic death is something seen throughout the play, and this comes to a head here. The comedy is still present, with the dressing up of Feste and the pantomime performance that he gives the audience, but the darker implications are certainly there. They are convincing a man that he is mad and removing his agency. Some may see this as deserved, and certainly Shakespeare has painted Malvolio as a villain in the play, and yet the more serious tone and lessened comedy gives us pause. This tone is brought back at the very end of the play, where audiences would have expected a clean and organised ending to the shenanigans. Malvolio is released to join the celebration, and the plot exposed.
Why? Alas, Malvolio, this is not my writing. Though I confess much like the character, but out of question, it is Mariah's hand. Where? And now I do bethink me, it was she first told me thou wast mad. Then camest in smiling, and in such forms which were, oh, look what you hear, were
He still remains separate from the jovial merrymakers and the happiness of the new couples, and honestly, who could blame him? Malvolio does not get his comeuppance or some grand punishment to make up for his actions, but he doesn't get a happy ending either. He is out of place in merry Illyria.
I'll be revenged on the whole pack of you!
No. He hath been most notoriously abused.
This is the note that the play ends on. Not the happy marriage of the two couples, but Malvolio swearing revenge and leaving the couples in bewilderment. He remains an obstacle as he is keeping the captain of Viola's ship prisoner, who is in possession of her womanly weeds, so she is stuck as Cesario and cannot become Viola so she can be with Orsino. It's a fractured ending that is only somewhat resolved in Feste's closing song. Shakespeare usually complicates the conventional ending, stressing the fragility of its artifice, and we are left with the question of what the significance of this ending could mean. Does it harm the play as a comedy, or does it simply make it more real?